So I'm here with Liam Coyle, a UCDSU presidential candidate. Liam, how are you doing?
Very good. I'm quite well, and I'm looking forward to voting day, where the students will be able to vote for their SU president, and I hope that they choose me for that.
Oh, great, great. We'll jump in straight off the bat. Why do you think you'll make a good SU president?
Well, I think the students should vote for me because I really do believe that I'll transform the student experience and really, create. I really want to create a better student life for each and every student and represent them by listening to them, listening to their concerns and acting on their concerns. So if I get the SU president position, I will prove to everyone that I was the right candidate for the job and prove my worth. So what that means is I will use every tool, both personally and professionally, to help and represent the students of UCD to the best of my ability, and secure for them a better student life.
Right. You've already held office in the SU. Previously, I mean, you are currently the business college officer. But then I also understand that earlier in the campaign, you had a mishap with the sending of an email from that account. Now, obviously, being involved in that previous election campaign to run for college officer, surely the rules for that and the rules for the presidency are not so different that that mistake could, if you had known the rules back then, you would have still known the rules now. What's your take on that?
Well, for that situation, it was a genuine mistake, and I wasn't aware of the regulations at that time, and I did reach out to the returning officer for them, and perhaps I could have had a bit more patience and waited, but it was 3 days, and you know how other candidates could capitalize on that. But I did rectify the situation. I did, exonerate and vindicate myself from that. I did open the floor. I don't know if you were at the SU Council, but I did open the floor for questioning, which not many executive officers have done in the history of the SU, and the chair of the council said that. And I think that really shows my transparency that I'll bring to this position of the SU president, that I will make sure that the SU is transparent. And I think through that it will build trust with the students for the SU. So I did show transparency once that situation occurred. So.
And of course, you've lived out your 14-day campaign ban as well.
Yes, that's in history books now. So I'm free to go now. So it is a learning curve, but as I did say that I did show utmost transparency, and I think that'll stand to me in this campaign, that it is something to look out for an SU president.
Of course, of course. So now moving on to your manifesto itself. Obviously, you state that you want to return to social activities on campus, obviously with the guidelines allowing. Are you not worried, though, that this is a dangerous promise to make, especially considering the uncertainty of whether, when, if, and to what extent restrictions will be reduced in the future?
I mean, as I have stated, that, as you know, per the guidelines that are prevailing at the time, I think that we should try and phase in as much as possible a return to the college experience, because I think a lot of students have been severely damaged by not being on campus, especially the first years. And if I get elected, they will be the second year. So I think that we need to make sure that they are, they get on campus and they experience college life that, like many of us have. But I think that in order to do that, we'll have to partner with maybe societies and make sure that the best events in the past are brought back. And I do believe that it can be done in a very safe way, because safety and I suppose the guidelines is of utmost importance, and we don't want anyone falling sick or getting COVID. So I think that is of utmost importance. But also we can hold events, and it is a beacon of hope now that we have the vaccination process going out. So that'll be watched very closely.
you mentioned first years and second years specifically there. What are your, like, how exactly, in your manifesto, you say you want to get them to get to know UCD as much as the rest of us do. How exactly are you planning on doing that right now without any knowledge of what's going to happen in the future?
Well, I think we have brilliant resources in UCD and the Students' Union. I think that it can be, the COVID-19 pandemic has really had a negative effect, but I think it also has had advantages where we can now have a blended experience where we can really show awareness of UCD both online to students and face-to-face. So we can do orientation towards both online, so we can show students videos and maybe even a virtual experience, but also face to face. So I think it can be a blended experience since there is so much uncertainty at hand. But I do really believe that this is something that not any other candidates are really prioritizing, which is the first and second years that have really been, if I'm going to be honest, the most severely impacted by this, by the lockdown and the college experience being not as great as it once was. So.
I mean, with all that said, I'm assuming you would want to work pretty hand in hand with the entertainment officer in that instance, because that all sounds very, and their remit, what they would be looking at. So that said, as president, as the UCDSU president, how well would you work with the rest of your team and the rest of this? And the rest
I think that's an extremely good question, and I think this really highlights to me that I don't believe the other candidates have is these brilliant leadership, but also teamwork skills. Not many people that roll up for this position understand that you're going to be working with an executive team that you don't actually get to choose who you work with. They're all elected officials. So I think that bringing my teamwork skills from projects and my business background, along with being able to lead the team, I think that you did mention the entertainment officer. I think it would be a full team approach, bringing every officer into this situation and making sure that we all, I suppose, work and I suppose benefit each other in a kind of a symbiotic relationship, because it really is going to take every single executive officer and SU staff member to make sure that the first and second years are kind of not left behind, so to speak, and that none of them are disadvantaged from this I suppose lockdown or I suppose the virtual learning that they did start off with. And it really is, when I do say events, it's really going to be focused towards socialization and making sure that they make those connections, those valuable connections and valuable friendships with people. So I think that is really important.
Moving on to something that's not too dissimilar, you mentioned as well an online notice board for the students. Now, obviously, that will reduce printing costs, as you mentioned in your manifesto, but have you given any thought to what the actual cost of hosting such a website, because there would be a website, would be on the SU, and sort of how to go about funding that?
I think that the budgets from the SU are quite plentiful, and that it could be it is the virtual notice board is something that no other candidate has really thought of, and I think it really it kind of points towards like a new approach, so to speak, of helping students. So we do remember the people that have been on campus, the famous UCD notice boards that go along the main walkway. I think that can be brought virtually to some extent to help students across the board, in terms of accommodation and mental health and grinds programs. So I think that it might cost, but I think in the long run, it will, the advantages will far outweigh the kind of disadvantages or the costs involved, especially with regard to rent, printing costs and the carbon footprint of UCD. As we know, it's quite a large footprint, but I do believe that students will benefit from this grinds programs and virtual notes.
You say that the budget is quite plentiful. Do you actually know what the budget is and sort of where the money comes from and where it's going at the moment?
Well, I wouldn't know the exact amount, but I do know that you know, there is a budget there to be spent, and I do know that a lot of budgets for both officers, a lot of it is, you know, it doesn't get spent fully, so it does go on to the next year, I suppose. So I mean, in terms of getting change done, such as virtual notice boards and grinds programs, and, you know, helping students out, there is I suppose funding there. And of course, it doesn't have to be just you know, to the SU extent. We can always look to partnership, such as, you know, with the government. I know that a lot of students benefited greatly from the laptop loan scheme, and a lot of students that were disadvantaged during the pandemic. I really believe that we should be expanding that for future years. I really believe that we should be kind of taking the best of what happened out of the pandemic and applying that for when we're coming out of the pandemic, and such as, you know, extending that laptop loan scheme, and, you know, maybe even a payment for students. I know that a lot of students got a discount on their tuition fees. So I think that we should be looking for a partnership, and, you know, if that can be even applied to the virtual notice boards and grinds programs, we can really be looking for funding in other areas as well.
Fair enough. But yeah, just for the sake of your understanding of the budget itself and how the SU runs, do you know where the funding comes from? Do you know how UCD actually, I mean, the SU creates its budget?
Well, I believe that from my understanding, it's the from the students themselves have to, when they're paying their fees, that the funding comes from there. But I do believe that, as I did say, that the budget isn't the only kind of tool set or kind of weapon in the SU's arsenal for these kind of initiatives. So.
No, of course. Just also for your knowledge as well, the SU runs a number of shops as well that create quite a bit of revenue, and actually more revenue from the shops than at the student levies. Just for your knowledge as well.
Yeah, and we'll be hoping to get them fully operational as per the guidelines, because they do generate a lot of revenue, as you did say.
Yeah. So then, how would you grade or rate your predecessor Connor Anderson's performance leading into the selection? Obviously, it's been a difficult year for him and for the current SU. So how would you rate his performance?
I would say, as a general remark of his as his kind of a position, he did, I suppose, have a bit of bad luck in terms of coming into this position in such an unprecedented year, such as a pandemic. I do believe in any position that, you know, you cannot fulfill a position to the utmost. There's always going to be things that you don't get right. I do believe that he has done a lot of good, you know, positive things, such as rallying students. But also, I will say now that I am not a fan of the militant SU approach that he has been advocating for. I do believe that the SU can go about its business and get things done in a more diplomatic manner, a more kind of a more calm and collected manner, I suppose. And that in a militant approach where you know, protesting and aggressiveness is, I do not believe the first approach that the SU should be taking. I do really advocate that through communication, negotiation, and diplomacy, that the SU will be taken seriously again by UCD and others. I really do believe that the militant approach that they keep going on about has really severely damaged the SU's reputation and the SU's ability to be taken seriously. So that is something critical that I'll be bringing into this SU president position if I am elected, which is a much more calmer and a much more diplomatic solution.
Right. Well, we do know that Anderson has had interviews with, or not interviews, but meetings with Deeks over the past year, and so has Rory Power and Leighton Gray. They've all been involved quite severely in that. to get that diplomatic conversations flowing. So what would you do more than the current leadership has done to encourage that, not only the communication from UCD, but actually their cooperation with the SU demands?
I think in terms of collaborating and I suppose a partnership with UCD is really coming to the table with them and seeking compromise. And because both sides of the one coin, they both have different stories to tell and different, I suppose, agendas and things they want to get done. So I really don't believe that a brute force approach is the best way, and I don't really think it has worked. Obviously, it has worked in some areas, but I still don't believe that in terms of UCD Students' Union's reputation and their kind of credibility, I really believe that the first course of action is communicating with key management figures in UCD, making sure that we come across in a much more calmer and much more people to do business with and kind of work with in a collaborative manner. I think is the first step in the SU building a better relationship with UCD, because recently we all have seen that UCD has kind of been, not exactly in the most collaborating manner with the Students' Union. And I think that is because of the militant approach that it has been pursuing.
Right. Obviously, your role wouldn't just be to work with the management, but also it'll be working with students. What's your and you've said it yourself, Anderson's been very good at gathering students and lobbying and just sort of communicating with the general populace. So how would you go about doing that and engaging with students that elect you?
I think that because of the COVID-19 pandemic, it has really highlighted and illustrated new forms of reaching out to students. So I think that we can both do it virtually, meet online and meet face-to-face, get on the ground with students, find out what is wrong with them. And I'm going to bring in a new, I suppose, program that my other two opponents are not, which is a student-wide student outreach program. So firstly, in my position as business college officer, I did have a kind of a smaller pilot scheme of this, a student outreach program in the business school. So I do have experience with this. And I really believe that this can be done both, on the ground, face-to-face and virtually, where we kind of find out the concerns of students, what is going wrong for them, what is going right for them, finding out how they are doing. So that's really tackling the mental health side of things. I really believe that a student outreach program should be rolled out. And if I am elected, I will be rolling it out to the whole UCD-wide community. And I think that is going to be a critical kind of weapon in use in the Students' Union's arsenal to finding out what is the student thinking about, what is kind of plaguing them, what is the thought process. And I think that is really going to be something that I stand out against my opponents.
I mean, I'll touch on the mental health in a moment. Just going back to your manifesto again quickly. Obviously, the rent crisis is a major issue in the moment for students. And as you've already stated, you want protesting to be a last resort. So how do you, in particular around the rent crisis, how do you expect, or how do you plan on achieving the goals that you set out in your manifesto to solving the rent crisis issues?
Sure. So what students want this to be about is that it all, I suppose, accommodation is available to them, more is available to them. It's more accessible, so they're able to get it more easily. And that it's, most importantly, I suppose, it's cheaper, it's more affordable. So I think on those three bases that we can, I suppose, lobby and negotiate with key partners, both in UCD, I suppose the landlords, and most importantly, the government. The government is a very strong ally of the Students' Union. We have many, I suppose, government officials that are really fighting for this. And I think that we really need to, I suppose, have a new approach to this, where we kind of have a more focused approach on lobbying government officials, but also within the UCD community. I suppose we can communicate with key officials in UCD residences, see how that's going on, but also, as I did say, lobby landlords to see what's going on with them, and try and do this in a manner that's, given due diligence and care. Because I have said this before, that if we go about, protesting as a first option, that clears away and ruins any other, I suppose, paths or routes we can go down, because that literally wipes the table away with any kind of other acts of recourse, I suppose. So protesting is a worst case scenario, but it would be the last one for me. It isn't off the table, but through communication, effective communication, which I'll bring to the executive team, I'll be able to make sure that on all fronts, the executive team is, I suppose, harnessed to the best of their ability and to my own ability, and make sure that we target effectively all options before a protest.
If all of those options are explored and come up empty, how would you go about organizing a protest in a time of a pandemic?
I believe that, as I did say, that the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us that a blended approach is the most a very valuable, I suppose, tool, where we're both organizing online and face-to-face in person. So I think that making sure students know exactly what's going on, make sure they're in the loop and that they're updated regularly. But I do believe that my other two opponents are going for, especially Rory, a student-led kind of campaigning. I believe differently. I believe that the Students' Union, and especially the SU president, should make sure that students are able to, because students have a lot of workload and they're very busy, throughout the term. So I think that SU should play a kind of a facilitator role, because students are up to their eyeballs in work. And I think that they need a guiding force. And I think that's really where the Students' Union president really comes into its own, where it's a guiding force, a guideline, and it really shows a good leadership kind of position for the SU to help develop and chart a direction for these students. So I think they should be, the SU president should play a role in influencing, obviously through student consultation and finding out what's going on, through maybe, if I do get in the student outreach program, and then kind of acting upon those concerns and kind of mounting and forming a kind of a movement or a campaign. So I don't believe that it should be fully on the students, because they do have a lot of responsibilities outside of their work and their the student activism side of things. So I think that, as I did say, it really shows, and I will bring this into the position, my leadership skills from my experience as a business student and a business college officer to this position to rally the students.
As you've mentioned earlier as well, the SU has not necessarily got the best of looks at the moment amongst the students and amongst the college itself. You mentioned it's because of the as you put it, the militaristic approach. A lot of people would also say that it's also got to do with the unsuccessful no detriment policy, as it was advisory, not mandatory, which Anderson has already spoken about, the SU being seen as a scapegoat for UCD's failing, but not their own. But with all that said, would you go about, how would you want to reintroduce a no detriment policy, and how would you go about making it mandatory if you were in favor of a no detriment policy?
Firstly, I think a no detriment policy is, I think that was a miscommunication. I really believe that it shouldn't have been communicated like that. I think they let it go down they can go down the hill, so to speak, too far, and they should have really cut it off before it got too much of a movement. The idea in principle, while it is, it is for the benefit of students, we have to look realistically here. And this is coming from my own business background, that you must firstly, scan the kind of the opportunity, or the I suppose the situation for, is it realistic? Is it able to be acted upon? Because that is the most important thing for representing the students, not to, I suppose, give them false hope, such as a no detriment policy. I believe that other kind of ways to bring this in is such as the Trinity way of, I suppose, giving the correctors and the examiners power of, I suppose, upgrading a grade if a student is not happy with it, or extending guidelines. So that's kind of a basket solution for the kind of the current stresses and strains and anxiety on the students, because I myself as a student know how much workload and how much stress I suppose this year has been in terms of working virtually. So I really think that there is other ways of tackling the kind of the workload and the really stressful environment students are in, through giving I suppose UCD examiners more powers in trying to come to a solution with a grade, or extending guidelines and being more lenient. I think that could be a very powerful tool in I suppose a blanket kind of solution, as I said, ensuring all lecturers and examiners and professors are grading these students based on these, I suppose, unprecedented environments that they're in at the moment. I don't believe that, as I did say, that a no detriment policy can be, I suppose, implemented, as there is a lot of implications with GPA. So I think in terms of bringing something to the table, in terms of a more diplomatic solution, we need to really make sure that these ideas and I suppose options are realistic before we consider them.
Fair enough. Speaking of potentially unrealistic options that have been brought up, and obviously it ties in with a bit of student stress, the idea of waiving or having no resit fees has been a very powerful point of contention at the moment. What would you say? Would that be a part of your plans as president, to try and waive the resit fees, and how would you go about doing that if it were, or why wouldn't you do it if you weren't planning on doing that?
I think waiving resit fees is an extremely valuable opportunity for students because it is a very stressful time, even outside of the pandemic, when you think of failing an exam or a component and having to pay quite a substantial sum to resit or redo a module or an exam. So I think that we can pursue that, and I think the whole executive team can pursue that as one. So I think on a united front, I suppose we could communicate and negotiate with UCD and other UCD parties to kind of seek an agreement, because if we can't waive the full sum, there can be other arrangements where maybe it isn't the full sum. Maybe we have other financial assistance for students, such as extending or expanding the SUSI or HERE schemes. I suppose even getting the government, like they did just at the end of last year, with a kind of a student contribution just to help them out, which would cover some resit fees. So I think just looking at it like that, there is multiple options on the table. It is quite wise to, I suppose, look at everything you have before you go down one option, such as what happened with the no detriment policy.
Right. Then you've obviously brought up a lot of interesting ideas, good ideas, and if you were not to be elected, I'm assuming you would want some of those ideas to still be implemented by the elected president if you brought it to them. Would you be willing to work with defeated candidates on in a similar manner? If say, for example, Rory had a brilliant idea that you hadn't thought of and he wants to bring it to you, how would you go about working with them to implement certain things that if that's what the students wanted, but not necessarily in your immediate plans?
Of course, I would work with any defeated candidates to ensure that on a united front, that the best ideas that they did come up with can be, I suppose, in my own plan. But I have seen their ideas and their plans, and I don't believe that currently that I feel like I've covered a lot more ground than them, and that in terms of their own promises, I think that a lot of what they're saying is lobbying, and I feel like that's kind of a old promises. I think that for a SU president, you need to be promising something new, some kind of change. And I do know that they have promised a lot for lobbying, but especially with Rory, he is extremely hardworking. But I think he was directing his efforts in, I suppose, less important things, and not making as much impact as he could have as welfare. And I think that in terms of a welfare officer, this year needed the welfare officer more than they ever needed, I'd say, in the SU's history, due to the amount of stress and strain and the lack of welfare going on with students. So, I mean, I would work with them to bring on ideas that I both agreed with, but in terms of my own ideas, I believe that mine have been a lot more creative, a lot more detailed. That is something I need to emphasize, that as you can see in my manifesto, it is quite detailed compared to the others. And I think that speaks leaps and bounds on my ambition for SU president. So as I said, I would work with them, but I think that I have a lot more there that needs to be acted upon before I even consult with others.
Right. Lastly, is there anything you want that all the UCD students to know about you before they go out and cast their votes?
Well, I will make sure that every student is represented to the best of my ability in terms of improving their mental health and well-being, securing financial support, and even non-financial support, such as expanding the laptop loan scheme. I will advocate for that. And I think in terms of collaborating with UCD to ensure that it's a more transparent institution. And I will bring my own business background in terms of a proven track record from being a business college officer, and expanding upon that experience to make sure each and every student is looked after, and that they're in a better state than they are when I started office, if I am elected. So if the students vote for me, I will make sure to secure a better student life.
Fantastic. Anything you would like to add?
No, that's Great. All.
Okay, cheers. Thanks so much, Liam, for your time.